Hey everybody, this is Adrian Keesey with 1289 Creative. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. In this video, I'm going to show you how I filmed a beautiful cinematic real estate video tour using just an iPhone and a DJI Osmo Mobile 3 stabilizer. This video is geared to anyone looking to step up the production value of their content without breaking the bank, and to illustrate that if you understand how your camera works, how to light, and how to tell a story, you can squeeze out a lot of quality out of inexpensive tools while you're saving up for that more professional equipment. Before we dive right in, let's talk about what a gimbal is. Mechanical gimbals have been around for a while, and they work by using weights mounted to some sort of shaft that counterbalance the weight of the camera they're carrying. This dampens the jerkiness and the movement introduced by you when walking around with a gimbal. Electronic gimbals are newer, but they help you achieve the same cinematic look and feel to your video using a very different method. They constantly read sensor data to define the position and orientation of your camera. This sensor data is fed into motors that move in real time to cancel out the movement and jerkiness you're introducing into the video. The result is video footage that is very stable, very smooth, and has a cinematic look and feel. Electronic and mechanical gimbals come in different sizes to support different weights for cameras. They can carry everything from a full production rig to a DSLR and of course a smartphone. Electronic gimbals can be very expensive, but fortunately the Osmo Mobile 3 will only set you back about $100. Now that we know gimbal basics, let's talk about the setup and the settings I use to create this real estate video on the cheap. The first step is to properly balance your gimbal, which is super easy on the Osmo. Here's the Osmo Mobile 3. I've got it connected to a little tripod that makes it easier to set down and balance. And all you have to do is unfold it. And there are stickers around the outside that will show you where your phone camera should be. You'll just slide your phone right in. And you're going to hold the motor axis here. And you're going to see which way the phone wants to tilt. And you're going to slide it in the opposite direction until you can let go of the phone and it stays in place. You're going to rotate it 90 degrees and do the same thing until the phone stays in place. Now you've got a pretty good balance and you can power the thing up. It's going to do a quick startup sequence and start in the vertical mode. If you double tap the M button, it'll switch to horizontal view. Now you're probably wondering, why do I have to balance this gimbal? Isn't the whole point that it balances itself? Well, yes, but if you have a bad initial balance, the motors will be constantly running to compensate. The result is that they'll generate more heat, more noise, and ultimately drain your battery faster. Next, you'll want to adjust some gimbal settings to really dial in your parameters and get the most out of your iPhone's camera. In the DJI Mimo app, click the settings button, then the gimbal icon. For this video, we're not going to change the follow mode. The Osmo Mobile 3 has active object, people, and face tracking, which can be really useful when vlogging or keeping the subject in focus. This is where you can adjust how the Osmo tracks. You want to make sure sports mode is turned off. When enabled, this makes the Osmo extremely responsive to the slightest movements, but we're looking for the smoothest footage possible. Set your zoom speed to the slowest setting. I don't recommend zooming in while you're filming because the zooming does not start smooth, but if you do, this will make the overall transition slower and more smooth. Set your control stick speed to slow. If you want to pan around a room or tilt the camera while you're moving, this will ensure it's a very smooth, fluid motion. I keep my control stick direction to free, but you can lock it in the vertical or horizontal axis. This just means the joystick will respond to a full motion circular direction that includes moving the camera diagonally or in an arc motion. Locking the direction to horizontal or vertical means it will only move up and down or right and left. If you move the joystick diagonally, it will decide if you're closer to moving horizontally or vertically and move the camera accordingly. I don't invert the pan and tilt controls. This is user preference and will reverse the camera movement with respect to the joystick direction. If you slide left, the camera moves right. If you push up, the camera goes down, and vice versa. I can adjust what the mode button does on the handle of the gimbal. I've left this at its default setting. Ensure your gimbal is properly balanced. Then you can start an auto calibration. This will adjust the internal motor settings to best pair with your balance and ensure the smoothest performance. If you notice that the gimbal's home position is slightly rotated off axis, you can adjust the horizontal adjustment to correct it, and this offset will be stored into the Osmo's memory so that the gimbal always homes properly when you power it on. Next, we'll adjust the camera settings to ensure we get the best quality from the iPhone. It's vital to use manual settings when filming video on your iPhone to make editing and post-production easier. Oftentimes, the automatic settings will result in footage that is unusable or blown out. The first setting we're going to adjust is the resolution and the frame rate. To get the most quality out of your iPhone sensor, you want to shoot in 4K resolution, or 3840 by 2160. The final size of this recording will actually be HD resolution, which is 1920 by 1080. But shooting at 4K resolution allows me to get the maximum quality out of the phone camera, and I can zoom in the footage when editing without losing quality. I set my frame rate to 60 frames per second. Most video is played back at 24 or 30 frames per second. 24 frames per second gives you that cinematic film look, but I'm choosing 60 frames per second for this shoot because it captures twice the number of frames in 1 second. This allows me to slow the footage down by 50% when editing without the footage being choppy, and makes the footage from the gimbal even more smooth by spreading out the movement over a longer period of time. Now click the M or manual icon in the app to adjust the image settings. The first setting we'll adjust is the shutter speed. This is the time the camera sensor is exposed to light. In photography, a faster shutter speed lets in less light but freezes motion better. A slower shutter speed lets in more light but is more susceptible to motion blur, which is why you need a tripod at slower shutter speeds. In video, a general rule of thumb to achieve the most realistic motion blur between frames is to set your shutter speed to 1 over twice the frame rate. Because we're shooting at 60 frames per second, we'll set our shutter speed to 1 over 120. If we were shooting at 30 frames per second, we would set it to 1 over 60, and so on. The iPhone is pretty limited and does not let you adjust the aperture or the size of the opening from the lens to let light hit the sensor. So if your footage is too dark, you'll want to bump up your ISO only as much as needed to get a good exposure. But if it's too bright, you'll need a neutral density filter, which are like sunglasses for your lens. They block some light so you can get a good exposure while keeping the proper shutter speed. But be careful, because cheaper ND filters sometimes introduce a vignette or a color cast on your image. If you're a bit more advanced and want more control over your footage, there is a setting to manually set your white balance. White balance aims to remove color cast so that objects that are white in real life appear white in your video. By default, most apps are set to auto white balance, and in most cases that does a good enough job. Now you're ready to start filming. I generally keep my videos 1 to 2 minutes long because it's a good balance to keep your audience's attention and show off the space you're filming. Keep that in mind when you compose your shots to make sure you fit everything without dragging or rushing the shots in the final edit. Let's talk about basic gimbal moves. Keep your moves simple. Complicated movements and transitions are distracting and make your final video less professional. I like a mix of pushing into a room, pushing out of a room, panning left and right across a room, and rotating around an object while carefully using the joystick to pan in the opposite direction you're moving. This creates a nice parallax effect where the background appears to be moving faster than the foreground. Finally, I imported all my footage into Adobe Premiere Pro for the final edit, but you can use your editor of choice. Click on the thumbnail to view the final video, and if you learned something new or you like the content, please hit that thumbs up, please subscribe, keep creating, and stay blessed.